not just about you, but also what is it about that program that really calls to you? What is it about that that draws you to that specific program? That way, when the recommender is writing that letter, that's just another way for the faculty who are making that decision to be able to understand that for you.
This might be a very obvious question, but if there's no one necessarily in that field that you've worked with, or like if you, for example, if someone in a different field that you've taken as like your minor knows you better,
yep,
would it be more beneficial, but they don't have anything to do with what you want to study? Is it more beneficial to get someone that knows you better or someone who's a little bit closer to the subject?
I don't know what you're going to say about that, but I'll give you
I can use specifics if that makes it easier.
Well, sure.
Like if I want to go to graduate school for linguistics,
yeah,
and I have contacts in 2 different language departments, but my political science professor probably knows me the best, is like which one would probably be a smarter choice?
Okay, so the way I would just knee-jerk respond to that, which I do all too often, but I would say that I wouldn't get, say your grad program is requiring 3 letters of recommendation, I wouldn't have them all be that.
Okay.
I think to have one person who knows you really, really well, who has done graduate work and can speak to your level of ability at being a graduate student, to some degree that crosses some boundaries there, for how you are in terms of education in general. You're probably going to want to work with that person to figure out a little bit of the transferability of what you've done and how they know you in terms of political science and how that might translate a little bit. Always thinking in terms of transferable skills. What is there that you've proven yourself in that can be transferred over to that other discipline? But then I would be looking for some that could speak more specifically to that linguistics discipline as well. How about you?
I think what Robin said is right on the money. Most grad schools are going to require 3 letters of recommendation. But even if it wasn't specifically in the discipline that you're applying to, the first letter I would pick is someone that knows you really well academically, that is most capable of writing a favorable letter. That's the most important thing. But then try to get at least one letter that's somewhat close to the disciplines, or at least talks about transferable skills.
See, what I'm thinking of in terms of your situation, I work a lot with education programs, so think in terms of if it was political science and education. Political science is great and your ability to be a graduate student is great, but if what you want is education, they're going to want to know about that grad student piece, and that's important, but they're also going to want to know about your ability to work with children. So to some extent it depends on what those 2 programs are and how that works. That's a real good example of something to talk over with the grad admissions office. I would say, that graduate admissions office for that particular program at their institution is likely going to have a bead on their faculty and how they tend to come down on those sorts of things. So that's one where I'd really say you'd be in good shape to have that conversation with somebody. And the flip side of that would be if you had people that didn't have that person from political science who really, really knew you, and you just had 3 letters that were a little more neutral, that's not going to fare as well as doing the other piece.
Yeah, my question is about how many grad programs to apply to. I should have asked this earlier. But, in high school it was X number of reach schools, X number of schools that are probably in your range, and X number of safety schools. And I'm looking at grad programs, and I just don't know how many people normally apply.
So I don't know if everybody heard that. The question was basically how many grad schools do you apply to in terms of the undergrad level. There was sort of the reach schools, the midline schools, and then the safety schools. Again, for me, I guess the thing I would say there is the very first thing I would do is make sure that the schools that you're applying to are schools you're going to want to go to if you get accepted. So there is something to be said for, reaching and all of that, but the safety piece, I'm not sure you want to do a safety school if it's not really someplace that you're going to want to go when it's all said and done. That need for fit, both for the student and for the program, is really important at the graduate level because you're with these people a lot. So I would say you really want to look at that. I've known people who have applied to 7 or 8 different programs, and I've known people who have applied to 2. You know, some people have applied to 1. It just, I think to some extent, when you do your homework on different programs, I'm looking at how many have what it is that you're looking for. You'll sort of get a sense of that.
Yeah, I think a lot of it too is going to it's going to depend on the discipline. Talking a little bit about clinical psych, that's one program where if you really want a realistic chance of getting in, you're probably going to have to apply to at least a half a dozen schools and have a good GRE and good credentials. There are other programs that and a lot of programs in the life sciences and arts and humanities where you have a range of sort of a large research university like a Penn State or an Ohio State that are going to get a large number of applicants, and getting in is going to be fairly competitive. But there are also programs, very good programs at smaller schools where they're not going to get a number of applicants. And so all of that sort of has to be weighed into that decision. We talked a little bit about the GRE earlier, but one thing we forgot to mention is the GRE is administered on the computer. And so you get your scores as soon as you're done the exam, or at least you get the verbal and quantitative score.
Unofficial.
They're unofficial scores, but you'll know what the scores are going to be. And so if you're applying to schools where you know that the GRE is going to be weighted heavily, you'll at least have that piece of information too in making decisions about which schools to apply to.
Another note on that too, if you know a bunch of schools that you want to apply to, I think it's 5 that you get on the day that you take the GRE or the MAT, things like that. Your school codes, and you can just have your score sent free of charge that day to those schools. Even if you're not sure if you want to apply to that school or not, sometimes it's a good idea to do that. If you wait even 2 weeks, it's going to be $30, I think, a score to get that sent someplace else. We get materials all the time, just random materials from people, and we hold them alphabetically by your last name until we actually get your application, and then we'll put those things together. And we hold them at USM, we hold them for a couple of years. So there's no problem with doing that.
We talked a little bit about large research universities, smaller grad programs. That's another interesting thing in graduate study is that the larger schools tend to have good programs because they have large faculty sizes. There could be a biochemistry department at Penn State. It's probably about 75 faculty. It's a large program. And so the chances of working with somebody that's really good is quite likely. However, that doesn't necessarily mean that a smaller program is of poor quality, because graduate programs oftentimes are based on the research quality of the faculty that are in them. And so if you've got a renowned scholar in a certain area, he may be a graduate faculty member at a smaller school, and people that work with him are still going to get the benefit of working with an expert in the field. For instance, the one person that comes to mind at UMaine, we've got 2 of the foremost experts in climate change in the world. One's a member of the National Academy of Sciences, another one's soon to be a member of the National Academy of Sciences. And they're in a program at Maine that probably isn't offered at more than a half a dozen other institutions across the country. So unless you want to know or are familiar with the area of quaternary and climate studies, you wouldn't probably even think to look at that particular program. We talked a little bit about experience already. That's really going to depend on the type of program you're applying to. Most doctoral programs, the faculty in those programs are going to be looking for some type of research experience. How much really depends on the nature of the program. Life sciences, physical sciences, and engineering, and even in psychology, I think. Certainly our clinical program is looking for undergraduates who are majors in psych that have had some experience in psych research